Story 1. I grew up in what I can only describe as a typical middle-income household and had a decent job, so I was not poor. However, I dated a woman whom I met while she was in law school whose family was very wealthy. The subconscious expectations were overwhelming. I would plan a small surprise, and she would expect something like a trip to Europe. She was not trying to make me feel bad. Her expectations were simply very high based on the world she grew up in. Story 2. They are often insulated from the experience of peasant life. I was working 12-hour shifts in an industrial kitchen trying to save enough for my next semester of college. Her friend, whose house had a fully stocked kitchen that only the staff ever used, heard that I was working to pay for school and therefore could not take time off to go on vacation. She took a moment to think about my situation, looked concerned with her furrowed brow, and then finally asked, "Why don't you just tell your parents? School is a good thing. Of course, they will want to pay for that." Story 3. Many people pretend to be their friends and take advantage of them. They assumed I was doing the same and talked openly about it to me. It was honestly disgusting. Story 4. I learned how to play golf. Her father always wanted to chat with me about my future, plans, business opportunities, and college choices. He always wanted to discuss these over a round of golf at the country club. I really hate golf. Also, apparently $100,000 means nothing. He literally offered to buy me a new Mercedes and have my old beater truck disposed of. Story 5. No matter how humble and rational one is, dating someone in a significantly higher tax bracket will test one's ego and self-worth. Story 6. Being rich makes some people not really learn to take responsibility for their actions. A girl I used to date lost about $5,000 phones in a couple of years, but her parents would always immediately buy her a new one. I felt like she never learned from it. Story 7. You can have all the money in the world and still have bad taste. He would offer me his card to go get items to make his 4,800 square foot house feel like someone actually lived there. Otherwise, it just had sparse, ugly furniture and posters scattered around. Story 8. My story is a little obscure, so I will try to be straightforward about it. I am a male, and at the time I was around 19 to 20 years old. I was convinced I did not want to work and wanted to become a sugar baby. I had done some commercial modeling and was pretty confident with what I thought was a sharp tongue. I started going to country clubs, fancy restaurants, and bars in the hopes I could meet a highly successful woman. I was probably viewed and was propositioned as a prostitute more than a dozen times. One day, and I mention day because I think it helped, I snuck into a charity event at one of the best golf courses in my city. I met a woman there in her late 60s and we hit it off. She was a widow of a pretty prestigious local university's president. I managed to get back to her house, and it was massive. A literal mansion. I grew up in a trailer, so I had never seen something like hers before. I turned it on after that with a "I'm set" kind of attitude. We had sex and spent the next week together. I did not leave the house the entire time. She had a chef, a shower the size of a small bedroom, a pool. Just so much I was not used to. I even quit my job because I thought I should not leave, even though they were asking where I was. This all continued for about 3 months. Turns out she was very cool. I genuinely loved hanging out with her. We watched movies, talked for hours, walked around the neighborhood, and went out to dinner. She paid for everything. The age difference did not matter at all eventually. I got to the point where I liked her so much I decided to bow out. Even some bad people have a conscience, and this was not something I wanted. I realized I had no intention of this progressing. I was honest with her and we parted ways. I called her maybe 3 times a year after that just to check in for a little while, but now at 37 I am sure she is gone. God bless you, Anne. You were awesome in more ways than you know. Story 9. Equestrianism is an activity. Also, for almost any type of labor you can imagine, there is a service pool you can hire. Story 10. They will initially enjoy being themselves with you, as they were before they became wealthy. They will dote on you and buy you gifts based on what you bring to the relationship, whether companionship or something else. If the relationship continues to go well, they may subtly try to change you by integrating you into their social circle, influencing your clothing, and your views if they differ significantly. It will be up to you whether or not to accept these changes. Story 11. My college girlfriend of 5 years ended our relationship when her International Business Machines Corporation vice president father passed away and left her a large amount of company stock and valuable real estate. She discovered she was an heiress when someone delivered the will of her late mother in the middle of the night, which left most of the family assets to her. She had distanced herself from her family because her father was a bully, but once she inherited significant wealth, I was no longer good enough for her. Class separation, especially when a woman comes from a wealthy family, is a harsh reality. 40 years later, this experience still hurts. Story 12. Money insulates the family from accountability. The behavior I saw from them sometimes over the smallest things was shocking. Story 13. Not dated but was best friends with. They will never truly be able to comprehend your struggles, and therefore they will constantly dismiss and minimize your problems, which will lead to extreme frustration. Trying to explain to someone that you cannot afford takeout and need them to do their dishes right now so you can cook, while they tell you to just order out and put it on a credit card, is often not worth the friendship. Story 14. Irony and karma. Her mother hated me because I was a bum. Technically, I was. Her daughter said that I was going to do great. I did great later. Story 15. I wouldn't say I was poor at the time, but I grew up very poor. They were rich enough that they didn't really think about paying student loans. 2 key things I learned were, 1. They thought simply having money meant you were good with it. They had no concept of risk, sunk costs, or whether something was sensible as a position. It was very clear it was all just about what they would like to do, have happen, or believe is right in a perfect world, not what is the better option in our circumstances or how real-world constraints actually impacted it. To be clear, I don't just mean financially. Story 16. I learned that for some, money above a certain amount directly facilitates the development of paranoid, hoarding, and antisocial behaviors, such as being overly self-protective. I think this comes from the fact that it's unusual to have a lot of money in a world where many people need that money to be shared, where it may actually be unethical not to share. I'm sure there's a lot of complicated interpersonal dynamics within that situation. I developed more compassion for people who are extremely wealthy from dating my former partner. I also think that the more money you have, the more you fear losing it. She was very anxious about only making $12,000 in a day instead of $18,000, and I told her that I only had $200 to my name and that I felt fine. She was genuinely astounded. It was very interesting. Story 17. Even when they struggled in the early days, most have forgotten what it is like to not have money. They lose touch with reality quickly. A couple thousand here and there is nothing. Meanwhile, we live paycheck to paycheck and they cannot understand why. Story 18. My ex-girlfriend's family was financially far above my upbringing. I was constantly compared to members of their family and could never meet their expectations. There was a huge difference in norms and what was acceptable or how things were handled. For example, a summer barbecue was a polo shirt and slacks or fancy dress shorts event, not t-shirt and shorts. They kept personal events within the house to an extreme extent. We don't talk about the family outside the house, I was specifically told. Whereas growing up poor, everyone knew your business. Story 19. I would not consider myself poor, but I dated a woman who was technically a 1%er for a couple of years. She was an amazing person, extremely grounded and genuine with excellent parents and upbringing. While she did shop high-end, she was still frugal and low-key about it. The only way someone would have known she had money was that she had a Mercedes G-Wagon, and only because it was her dream car. Story 20. They can be petty, very petty, more so than any poor person I have ever met. My ex-wife's family was ridiculously rich, but they were cheap and fake. Story 21. I dated an Austrian baroness for a while. She and her family were absolute psychos, narcissists, sadists, and very elitist. I believe there is some inbreeding in the H. Bickler family. Story 22. I thought wealthy individuals would be the stereotypes I saw on television. The ones I met put a lot of energy into pretending they were just normal people. Story 23. My insights are based on a combination of falling for someone from a rich background or dating upper-middle-class men who knew they would inherit family wealth eventually, and dating people who grew up in developed countries while I was from a poorer country. I realized a lot of their time and energy did not go into figuring out survival, career, and money like mine did. They had choices and a relaxed attitude. The way they tackled education, interviews, or opportunities was different. They knew they would not necessarily lose much if they did not get that. Whereas for me, every conversation, application, and interview felt very much like life and death. Also, they could plan for a longer runway. For me, it was hard to see beyond a couple of weeks or months because I did not know if I would have enough money to get by. They could be in a similarly stressful situation but also be planning a vacation midway because they knew they would be fine in the long term. Story 24. Wealthy individuals often do not know the cost of everyday items, nor are they aware of the income of those who are not affluent. Story 25. Married a wealthy person. Regular problems arise, but also unbelievably silly problems that only happen when you have too much money and no real problems, so you have to make some up. Extended family is building a $2 million custom home in a rural area and are deeply distraught that the specialty plumbing expert they need to fly in from Norway will cost a high fee for a consultation, which does not include installation nor future maintenance. You do not need fancy European plumbing in rural Idaho, trust me. Story 26. I find wealthy men make the best lovers. Is that true? No, but if you tell them that, sometimes they give you their credit card and let you loose in the mall for an hour. Story 27. My brother dated a wealthy girl for about a year. They broke up because he never wanted to do anything since he was supporting himself through university. She had no understanding of money. She would ask him to come with her to Europe for the weekend and similar things. She once bought a new car because she saw it in a nicer color. When they broke up, he had about $10,000 worth of jewelry that she had bought him. He never wore jewelry unless she asked him to. Story 28. Most people are actually much more humble than someone pretending to be wealthy. There is a huge difference in how a woman with a Gucci belt, Louis Vuitton bag, and a negative balance will treat you compared to a man dressed head to toe in affordable clothing but with $2 million in his account. Story 29. They just could not understand when I needed to say no to an expense, such as concerts that required plane tickets to attend. Oh, I'll pick a cheap dinner place. Ma'am, I have $200 in my bank account. It is not personal. I just cannot. Story 30. Most of my wealthy friends lived somewhat restrictive lives. Their families really held the wealth over their heads as a way to control them. You have to get a specific degree or go to a particular school or act a certain way or dress a certain way. These types of rules. Most of my wealthy friends were terribly starved for attention. My boyfriend was sent to school in Minnesota from Seoul. He was lonely and ended up being very needy once he latched on to me. He told me he rarely had contact with his parents even when at home in Seoul. It was all nannies and house staff when he was growing up. Story 31. The ones born into wealth, as opposed to working their way up and earning it, are shockingly naive, sheltered, and clueless about how the real world works. They literally do not get it. They might as well live on a different planet. They truly do not live in the same world you and I do. They also tend to be very emotional, catty, and dramatic, both men and women, because they have not had any genuine struggles or problems in life, so they are exceedingly bored. Therefore, they stir up conflict and invent problems and drama to have something to do, some kind of challenge to overcome and occupy their time. Story 32. Rich people's lives are so much more fun and luxurious that if everyone saw it, there would be a revolution tomorrow. It is absurd how much better it is to be rich, at least in America. Their healthcare, nutrition, hired help, homes, entertainment, travel, networks, clothes, products, and services they can afford are all unbelievably nicer. It is unreal to witness. Story 33. I am still dating my boyfriend, but he is the wealthier person. However, my parents are pretty well off as well, doctor and engineer, so the differences I notice are in the details. Background. My boyfriend's dad is in finance and manages a portfolio worth $1 billion. His mom will throw anything out if she doesn't like it anymore or just doesn't want it. This could be something she bought a week prior or even food she bought that day that she tasted and didn't like. My boyfriend, 23, and his sister, 28, Both have credit cards linked to their parents' bank accounts that they can spend freely on. I am now also allowed to use my boyfriend's credit card. Bills in general are rarely a concern. It doesn't matter how much it takes to heat the pool, run the sauna, or keep all the lights on in the house. Maybe my parents are just frugal, but things always have to be turned off in my household. Purchases are rarely contemplated. I feel like I go over each week, and they've bought something new. For example, my boyfriend's dad bought another jet ski for the summer so that my boyfriend and I could each have our own while on the lake. As a wealthy person, you seem to have multiple cars. I personally don't have my own car because I'm unwilling to spend my own money, but whenever I need one, I ask my boyfriend, and he lets me borrow his while he takes another one they have in their driveway. They are very casual about cars, even though, to me, they are expensive, around $100,000 per car. I was surprised when they just let me drive any car of theirs. A passion is a passion, and you can lose money on it if you have a lot of money in general. My boyfriend's dad bought a sports team because he really enjoys the sport. He's probably losing about $250,000 a year running the team, but because he loves the sport and sees some future in it after he retires, he's okay with it. This is the most important to me, being set up for life. No matter what my boyfriend and his siblings do, they will always have their parents or their inheritance to rely on. Especially my boyfriend, as he is the only biological child of his dad. I try not to think about it too much, but my boyfriend will inherit his dad's portfolio, business, properties, trust fund, and more. In reality, he is set for life, but thankfully he does not rely on it and works really hard in school. Small things. My boyfriend went to a party and had friends in his car when one person threw up in it. His parents simply bought him a new car, $95,000, as a solution. Wealthy parents will do anything to make their kids happy. My boyfriend had to spend one night in a hotel with a friend, and the room his mom booked was a city view. She asked if it was okay, and since my boyfriend didn't respond enthusiastically, she immediately paid extra for an ocean view, even though they would only spend 10% of their time in the hotel room. The room cost $1,300 a night. If you are wealthy, you must have your own jeweler who makes custom jewelry. Sadly, money doesn't always mean good taste, and a $70,000 ring can look ugly in my opinion. My boyfriend's sister has a massive shopping addiction and probably spends $20,000 to $30,000 a year on clothes. She currently has no strong job other than running the sports team. Most of her clothes still have the tags on, and she buys multiples of the same items, such as 5 of the same $100 shirt, just because she can. Luckily, she gives me some clothes. At the end of the day, these are just small things I notice. My boyfriend's family is very sweet and genuine, and I have always been made to feel like another daughter in their home. Story 34. I learned that many of our problems can be completely solved by money. Those who say otherwise are either lying, ignorant, or coping with its absence. Don't get me wrong, money doesn't solve everything, but it can buy you freedom from unpleasant work, physical and mental health care, food, and safety. So politely disagree if you must. Story 35. I learned her parents paid for everything. Her nice apartment, car, all utilities, and school. They told me they were investing in their future by doing this. They pushed her to be a nurse so she could take care of them when they were older. Poor woman never had a chance. Story 36. I come from extreme poverty, and my ex comes from a family that could see the Kennedy compound from across the bay. By the time we met, his family was more upper middle class and mine was still very poor. However, the divide between us was smaller than it had been in the past. At this point, his family is not doing very well, and I am living a little better than he is, but we are both solidly middle class. I couldn't believe the threats he made when he was angry. Everything could be normal, and then suddenly a custody dispute would arise, and he would immediately say, "My family will destroy you." He really believed it. In hindsight, I know they wouldn't have and couldn't have, but he truly thought he still had that power. When everything else fell apart, he clung to that belief and needed to feel that way. Story 37. It was a great experience for me. I learned about various types of cuisines and foods I did not know existed. She loved to travel, so she told me about the places she had visited, and I enjoyed her stories. I later traveled to some of those countries myself and was well prepared. Her father bought her a piano and a private piano tutor when we lived together. So I received some free lessons and can now play the piano. Her mother did a lot of charity work, so I volunteered in a few projects in Casablanca and Dakar. I learned that not all wealthy people spend money frivolously. Her family came from old money and did not spend excessively on cars and clothes. I did not realize how wealthy she was until we went to Paris and discovered that her family owned multiple properties in the 8th and 16th arrondissements and belonged to an old aristocratic family. Story 38. Money is a magnifier. Whatever good or bad traits you have become magnified by it. The nice people become the nicest. The not nice people become the most not nice. The generous become even more generous. And the miserly become even more miserly. Money empowers you to become more of the person you really are. Story 39. They are completely disconnected from reality, and making their own way means taking their trust fund and doing what they want with it instead of following their father's footsteps exactly. They have no concept of how they are at an advantage compared to other people. Story 40. They were entitled and unaware of poverty. They viewed themselves as poor only because they were poorer than their friends. They had a typical family structure with a love for the nuclear family. They upheld conservative or traditional beliefs and supported the monarchy. I remember one of the cousins, who was even wealthier, was exploring his sexual orientation, and everyone knew about it, but it was discussed in a very hushed, gossiping way. I felt sorry for him. It was like the family's dirty secret. There was a lot of gossip and manipulation. They tended to favor subtlety over directness. I think this comes with trying to maintain or improve social status. Story 41. It became evident that he was raised on nothing but money. He had no life skills, no emotional intelligence, no hobbies or opinions of his own. It was nearly impossible to have a constructive conversation with him because he just went along with everything I said and did without question. Felt like I was dating a lapdog. He failed his first year of college twice and had no drive to improve academically or even consider alternative paths. All he did was eat and play mobile games all day, including when we were out on dates or with friends. He was a sweet guy with good intentions, and he obviously did not choose the family he was born into, but none of the expensive gifts, fancy dinners, or boat rides could stop it from being the dullest relationship I have ever been in. Story 42. My last girlfriend's family was really well off. Her parents had multiple houses, a company, and a yearly income of around 500,000 euros in Germany. They were always nice to me, but I constantly felt like I didn't belong there. Many family members were doctors and held other high-class jobs. The children attended elite universities with tuition fees costing half of my yearly salary. This triggered a lot of insecurities in me, making me feel not good enough. I knew that if we stayed together, I would be very well off, but it always left a bad aftertaste, as if they had some form of control. They told me that if I ever wanted to buy a house, they would provide the money, but I am 100% sure this would have the side effect of them being able to say, "We gave you money, so we want you to do what we say." Story 43. They were a nice, normal, loving family, and they happened to be financially secure. I thought they might be weird about me coming from no money. They raised their son in an amazing way, and the family was close and incredibly open to me. I was very lucky to spend time with them and take part in activities I wouldn't have been able to without their son. I also found out they all participate in typical affluent sports like skiing, which I thought was only on television. Everyone had hobbies and life goals and was expected to be financially responsible. Now I am doing well financially, and I am grateful they treated me like a family member during that time. It was fun and really opened my eyes to a different type of family. Story 44. The difference between kind of poor, me, and comfortably middle class, her, is staggering. Edit. Sailing is amazing and very expensive. Story 45. If you cannot pay, you cannot play. I will give you an example. A wealthy girlfriend wanted to go on a ski holiday. I, the wage earner, could not afford it. She went without me. One time, she wanted to take a 2-week vacation in Australia. I could not get time off work, and I did not have the money saved, so she went without me. She liked expensive cocktails and prime cuts of meat at Michelin star restaurants that I could not afford, so she went without me. Eventually, noticing a pattern, I realized that she went without me a lot, and we ended up going our separate ways. She eventually married a wealthy man, unsurprisingly, a trust fund individual who kept making her pay for her own expenses, even after they were married. Story 46. I should have taken the car she offered to buy me. We did not see eye to eye politically, and I broke up with her. Many friends and family members told me I was ignorant for not taking the free vehicle. Story 47. It started and was already over in one weekend. We went to a posh nightclub where she and a few of her friends had bought out the entire second floor. They even posted security guards with earpieces and suits by the stairs to keep all the less fortunate away. You could walk up and get any drink you wanted from their private bartender. It was boring. Meanwhile, all the less fortunate people were having the time of their lives on the first floor. She grabbed me and pulled me over to the railing, looking down at the crowd below. Middle class and working class people dancing and laughing. Then she said, "Look at them. They all look up at us, wishing they were us." I felt sick and made my way outside. Unfortunately, I got drunk a bit later. One phone call, one taxi ride, and I was in her bed. We never spoke again after that. Story 48. I have generally found that when dating wealthy men, they treat me like a supporting character in their story, rather than a partner of equal standing and value, a fellow human being in my own right. They were often unhappy. I am sure exceptions exist, but I have not found them yet. Story 49. He chooses meals according to what he wants to eat. I choose meals based on the oldest item in the refrigerator. Story 50. I actually like the outcome of this one. I learned to appreciate higher quality clothing, not necessarily very expensive, but not fast fashion. The value of investment pieces. I feel like $1 million no matter what I wear, where I go, or who I meet. It is more sustainable for the environment to invest in staples that will last for years. That insight really made a positive difference in my life. Story 51. Be careful not to become their slave or to be pacified by large purchases. Do not let someone think they own you just because they can pay for things. Also, do not go into debt trying to match their lifestyle even if you want equality. Story 52. They really just don't get it. I can't afford that. When it is the luxury cheese instead of the no-name cheddar, it does not compute. It is all you can't afford cheese? Instead of, yes, let's get the cheaper option. And it is exhausting. Also, they never offered to pay. I do not know, man. It was very strange. A lot of the stresses in my life were not in theirs because they always had a financial cushion. It felt skewed in a way I have never had a relationship feel. Story 53. My ex was not rich, but his family was. He could not understand poor people's ethics. His family had no work ethic, no loyalty, and no genuine faces. Everyone felt entitled to be taken care of by the one wealthy person who supported everyone. Nobody felt the need to secure themselves without his money in case it was gone one day. Coming from a poor background, I know you cannot trust anyone to take care of you like that. You need to be there for yourself. Everything can be taken away in just a moment. Instead of working, building skills, or establishing themselves, everyone's only job was to flatter that one wealthy person constantly. They were willing to lie, cheat, steal, and worse to get on his good side. They mostly lived on islands isolated from ordinary people and had secrets that could ruin many lives across the country. These people are worse than drug addicts. They already have the money and will do anything as cruel as they can think of to get more. None of his family understood the importance of community. I hated that the most. Basically, I learned they are terrible people with power and status, and I will never be involved with anyone like that again. Story 54. Her parents were horrified and said, "Oh no, throw those away." When I reached for the bread ends as they walked in on us making sandwiches. Obviously not extremely wealthy, but still a big class shock. Story 55. I am attracted to effort and not fancy things. Gifts, first-class flight tickets, and luxury hotels do not have the same impact when they are planned and booked by an assistant. I would rather go camping or backpacking with a person who plans it for us and is equally excited about it as I am. Story 56. It can be a very lazy, loveless life that revolves around physical things. That being said, I have also met wealthy people who had loving families and healthy relationships. They are just like everyone else, really. Story 57. I developed a taste for rich people's cheese, wine, and whiskey. I can only occasionally afford to indulge in cheese, and I have basically stopped drinking wine and whiskey. That was 25 years ago, and I still remember what they were like and how poor everything subpar is. Story 58. I dated a trust fund baby for many years in my 20s. I always said when we were together the greatest thrill was filling up my gas tank and grocery shopping without having to check my bank account. But to be honest, the biggest lesson I learned was money really does not make you happy. I am grateful for our relationship just for the lesson that might have taken me decades to learn. It has been said before, but a good family is better than a rich family. These people were miserable with each other, and the money only made it worse. Everyone in the family was so isolated because of feuds that went back generations. Now for practical lessons. If you are able and have the self-control, put everything on a credit card, then pay it off immediately. Watch those credit card points rack up by the end of the year. Invest everything you can early on. That compounding interest could be your make or break in retirement. Hire a competent financial advisor as soon as you reach that point. They can help you move money around or invest to help lessen the tax burden every year. Story 59. I could not buy the small gifts I wanted for her at that time. Still breaks my heart today. Story 60. College should be paid for by parents. No student loans. Students should have a family credit card for living expenses. Budget 3,000. Keep in mind tuition, room, and board are covered by the parents. So that's just spending money. Car problems are inconveniences. Just get a loaner or a rental while yours is in the shop. No big deal. Same with car accidents. Get rid of the car after the accident, trade it in, and dip into savings to buy a new one. No big deal. The account will bounce back in a couple of months at most. You shouldn't work while going to school. It's stressful and distracting. When parents threaten to pull financial support as a means of controlling behavior, problems escalate quickly. Same issues, different mechanisms. Always be investing. Always be planning 10 years ahead. Never tie yourself to a job unless they pay you an absurd amount of money. Always advocate for yourself at work. Nobody cares about you more than yourself. Get into a position where people see you as the talent, and you will have all the freedom you want. Basically, be an individual contributor. If you want true wealth, start your own business and stay the course. This is advice I am personally not going to follow. Too much work. Once you hit a certain level, budgets don't matter. How much money you have doesn't really matter. Comes in, it goes out. It all manages itself once there's enough. Move to the West Coast from the Northeast? Sure. New house in Tahoe? Sure. Trip to Germany? Sure. Spur of the moment golf trip to St. Andrews? You only live once. The money always comes in. Some always goes aside for investment. The rest, everything is paid for, so it's just free cash flow. I ended up marrying this girl, and I think her parents sometimes forget how not rich we are. That a $1,000 expense is kind of a big deal. They just live in a different world. Story 61. I didn't date someone but nannied for a millionaire family. She divorced him and married a billionaire. I saw behind both curtains. What I saw was sadly that they were deeply unhappy. All her expectations were based on her looks, and she still got cheated on. She would drink to cope, and I had to get her face down off the toilet before her kids saw. The children had emotional issues. The boy definitely had daddy issues and would act out for attention. It was sad to see. I loved that kid. They were also very entitled in the sense that they were used to people responding immediately when they threw money at them. The kid couldn't understand that one night I had other plans. He kept increasing the payment to an absurd amount, and I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not available." He didn't understand. I could tell they weren't used to hearing no. Story 62. She could be the best or the most innocent wealthy person, but she still is a wealthy person. There are things about us less fortunate individuals that she will never understand, and those will challenge the relationship repeatedly. Story 63. Married, rich, and have a lot to say here. The stereotype that all people from wealthy families are lazy and entitled is far from true. If you grow up seeing your parents value education and work hard, you likely will too. My husband has some of the strongest work ethics I have ever seen. The very wealthy are smart about their money and protect it well. They diversify income sources strategically. They also set up trusts and foundations and various other protections for future generations, such as qualified terminable interest property trusts and only allowing members of the bloodline access to trusts, excluding stepchildren. Money does not fix everything, can make some problems like addiction worse, but it is nice knowing that most of life's inconveniences can be solved by writing a check. It is weird how people can treat you differently. My friends and family are all the same, but I have noticed jealousy from new people a couple of times. People sometimes oddly brag or put down things like the car you just got or try to compete with you. My husband has dealt with this his whole life and says to just ignore it, but I am still learning to navigate it. Lastly, while money cannot buy you happiness, the feeling of peace from being able to provide for your children and take care of your aging parents comes pretty close. Story 64. He was used to a type of luxury that was baffling to me in more ways than one. I had no idea he came from money until he invited me over to his place, and I realized it was posh, huge, and exclusive. When we met and while we were dating, he worked as a waiter and in the kitchen, doing long and late hours. He dressed well, took care of himself, wore nice watches, and was particular about his whiskey. Apart from that, he and his family were very grounded, despite the houses abroad with multiple cars and live-in staff. Except for the postal code and the birthday presents, which were extravagant, I would never have imagined he came from money. Story 65. That rich people are not evil. Many wealthy individuals are incredibly giving, considerate, and kind. I was raised in a household that preached that those with money are selfish, self-centered, and evil. Story 66. I'm very middle class, but when I was younger, I dated a very wealthy girl. She was from a boarding school background. They had absolutely no idea what it was like to go without. For example, on the 4th of July, she had a hard time deciding whether to spend it on her father's yacht or her stepdad's. She had serious personal issues and also struggled with a drug problem. Story 67. I worked for a wealthy family in my teens as a gardener. The daughter was only using me for sex. I learned that morals do not exist with them. Story 68. I grew up very poor. We never missed a meal, but dinner was frequently instant mashed potatoes and canned corned beef. My partner is not rich but definitely upper middle class. Her parents took her and a friend to a resort each summer. She never had to go without. I broke the family mold by getting good jobs and making something of myself. Or, as my mother was fond of reminding me, I was acting above my station. When it comes to money, my partner is very frugal, whereas I am happy to spend money on things that we want. We are lucky enough to have a good amount of savings and no debt. So if we need a new couch, I am like, cool, let's go buy the couch. My partner will agonize for weeks, sometimes months, over what to buy. Then once we eventually do buy it, she will second-guess the purchase. I have no idea what her issue is. I find it baffling. Story 69. Mine found a way to work it into too many conversations. She would pretend to be embarrassed by it, but it was clear that was just a way to bring it up while trying to relate to people. Story 70. He was a lazy person in everything and never pushed himself to achieve more. Although he moved out, he experienced a failure to launch. Story 71. A budget should cover everything you need, not be limited by how much money you have. This is hard to accept for someone who has lived paycheck to paycheck for 30 years. I never considered another perspective on what a budget means. They just buy everything they need and adjust if necessary. Checking prices every time before buying was not a habit. Want to get coffee? Go to the coffee shop you want, not the one that fits your budget. Buying groceries? Whole Foods is 5 minutes closer than Trader Joe's, so just go there. They would walk into any restaurant and get whatever they want, not worrying about the price. $2,500 per night for drinks with friends is just a drop in the bucket. No one expects anyone to pay their part. They just take turns paying the next time. Parties happen for any reason. Themes, decor, catering. A simple get-together might have a $5,000 budget for catering, alcohol, and decor. Dress codes are made for personal parties in private event spaces just to have a reason to go shopping. And moving, just living in New York City for a year to experience it beyond a vacation. Basically, doing whatever you want. I have incredible friends who inspire me to reach their level. They paid my full cost to go to the Electric Daisy Carnival with them because they wanted me to come. Never in my life did I think I could afford that. It's just wild. Story 72. That person's parents manipulated their children's reality with money on strings. They tried turning their adult child against me in many ways, hurting their child just to spite me. I finally found my way out of that dysfunctional group, but emotional scars remain. What did I learn? I learned to stay away from codependent potential estate beneficiaries. Story 73. Not all wealthy people display their wealth. Many old money families dress and live like the upper middle class but have significantly more money in the bank and properties worldwide. His mother and her siblings brag to each other about how cheaply they purchase things, saying things like, "I got this bag for $8. One aunt, married to a heart surgeon from an even wealthier family, scavenges landscaping materials from the side of the road for the garden of her multimillion-dollar home. Birds of a feather really do flock together. Almost every in-law of his mother's generation comes from wealthy families, and they are friends with other wealthy families. This also applies to values. All the family friends I have met, usually friends for 30 to 50 years, are similarly extremely wealthy but also friendly, down-to-earth, and generous. Additionally, on a similar note, they really love golf. Some things are universal, I guess. Story 74. I learned the little ways they will always think they are better than you. They have something they need to prove to a parent. There is a deep feeling of not being good enough. They absolutely know you are replaceable. They can genuinely like you, but if they get an idea of who they want to impress and the best way to do it is through a partner, they will discard you. Again, it is a deeper wound and they are constantly trying to impress someone. They are usually in relationships where there is a lot of power struggle on both ends. There are subconscious feelings of superiority and resentment from each side. The power struggle is not always obvious, but it is there. Money does not buy class. They eat food off the floor like dogs. Story 75. Ultimately, they will use their money to put you down. They want you to act as if you are grateful for everything they do. They think they own you. Story 76. It was used against me. He would beg to spend money on me. I was not comfortable with it and liked to pay my own way. He insisted on buying me a few things and paying for a vacation over the period of 1 year. I accepted because he was so genuine and told me this was all a gift and he expected nothing in return. Unfortunately, the man was extremely emotionally and verbally abusive, and it started unveiling slowly and in ways I did not know about. It was my first real relationship. A lot of coercion started. If I did not want to sleep with him, the guilt would begin, mentioning the vacation, groceries we both ate, and the gifts. I did a lot for this man. Even though it was not monetary, I would say it was equal. He would not have graduated college without me, for example. When I tried to leave him, he threw insults at me, saying I was a gold digger and used him for his money. I was so young and it was so hurtful. My first lesson was that people with money, if they are abusive, will use it as a tool to hurt and control you. Story 77. I dated a rich man. I wasn't going to share this, but I didn't see many stories about dating wealthy men. He was sweet when he was in love with me, pretending to be my prince. As soon as anything went wrong for him with work or in life, I became a leech and a gold digger. He told our friends he wanted me to make as much money as he did and felt it was a sign I wasn't as smart as him, despite him having an age advantage over me. Ultimately, we ended things poorly. He found a woman who made more money and confessed he would have preferred to be with me at his wedding if only I weren't so poor. It was a huge hit to my ego. I was making six figures at the time, and I thought that was incredible money because I had grown up on government assistance. It made me realize nobody will appreciate how far I've come, only where I am. It also made me realize most people will put financial security above everything else in life, even their own happiness. Story 78. Rich people just don't understand. He was disgusted with me buying groceries on discount, saying he would rather pay more for good quality food than risk the food being spoiled somehow. He had the mindset that poor people are dumb and should just invest more in better shoes that last longer, not understanding that you buy whatever shoes you can afford the moment your last pair falls apart. Story 79. I am sure this is not applicable to all of them, but the one I dated genuinely could not comprehend what it is like to not have money, and that ended up being the reason why I had to walk away. Story 80. Her parents made her end the relationship with me because I was not on their level. The ironic part is her father's business, which he inherited from his father, went under. I now make more money than him, his wife, and the woman who ended things with me combined. Story 81. I once overheard a girl I was dating speaking to her mother at her mother's large house. She was saying that she should only accept my proposal if I had a certain amount of money in the bank to support a baby if it happened, and if I got a mortgage on a property within the next year to future-proof myself. I never told her I heard any of this, hoping she would mention it first, but she never did. We drifted apart a few months later, probably because of the unspoken tension. My father-in-law was an absolute gentleman, a very wealthy man in publishing, and we just talked about jazz and real ale. To her credit, my mother-in-law was a cool lady too. It was just the checklist of requirements that was a bit shocking. Story 82. I learned that people with millionaire money can get away with many things. Unfortunately, bribery is everywhere, whether in law enforcement or among judges. They all come with a price. Story 83. The wealthy country club buffets are outstanding. Upper middle class country club buffets are less impressive. Story 84. Their wealth was in the 1 to 5 million range, so they were rich but not so rich that they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. I found most of them had really strong families with very few problems, or at least very few problems that were visible. Children were generally well behaved, and most of the kids had expectations of pursuing affluent careers, going to school to become doctors, lawyers, or similar professions. They also valued marriage more highly and were religious. My family was broken and had problems. Drug use was common. Parents did not know how to parent, and we did not have the resources to make any corrections. The people around me did not see value in marriage, and I remember myself and the kids around me mostly striving to work in the trades or do anything else that seemed like high income but was actually low income. Poor families around me also seemed to fall victim to scammers and multi-level marketing, basically anything that promised dreams. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.